Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that homeschoolers reach out to me a lot about as well, whether it's at a convention or on social media. Should you switch and how do you know you should switch? But I think it's helpful to start by just recognizing this is one of the gifts of homeschooling is that even though it is a hurdle to change, it's so much easier than if you're in a traditional setting.
Welcome to the show called Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. This is the show where we talk about everything homeschooling, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We want to affirm and encourage you in the decision to homeschool, challenge and inspire you to take it to new heights, and celebrate everything you get to experience along the way in this adventure of a lifetime. I'm your host, Davis Carman, and our guest today is Kathryn Gomes, author of Exploring Creation with Math. I want to remind you, our listening audience, that you can also watch us on YouTube or continue listening on your favorite podcast app. Today's show is titled Recognizing the Red Flags, When to Switch Curriculum, and How to Do It Effectively. So that's a long title, but we're going to make it simple for you. So, okay, Kathryn, let's talk homeschool. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's always great to be on this show.
So we had a conversation earlier this year where we were talking about the troubleshooting of math, addressing common challenges, and teaching math at home. So all the issues that related to that. Today we're going to look at some red flags, how to recognize them, such as when to switch curriculum, and when you switch, how to do that effectively. So let's talk about switching curriculum easily. A lot of people are very intimidated by that. I know with my own children, when we were homeschooling, one of the math curricula just wasn't working, and our student came to me and Rachel and said, I really think I need to try a different math. We knew that was probably the case, but we knew it was going to be a lot of work and effort on our part. And so we've been through this ourselves. It's not always easy. So what are some of your first initial thoughts to kind of get us going on this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that homeschoolers reach out to me a lot about as well, whether it's at a convention or on social media. Should you switch and how do you know you should switch? But I think it's helpful to start by just recognizing this is one of the gifts of homeschooling is that even though it is a hurdle to change, it's so much easier than if you're in a traditional setting. And I always think back, I taught in the public schools for 7 years. And when I was teaching in those classrooms, if I wanted to change something, I had to get school board approval. It was like turning a huge, freighter or something. It was really challenging. And a lot of times I might have thought of something that would be more effective for my students, and I just couldn't change it because I wasn't the person who got to make that call. So I always like to start, even in my own homeschool, just recognizing that it is one of the best things, and it really is something I just appreciate, that I can find a new program or I can see something and decide we're changing. This is going to be a better fit. Not that there aren't hurdles, but it's so much easier than in other school settings, and is definitely one of the strengths of homeschooling.
That's a great point, and I think in a lot of ways it can change our attitude about selecting curriculum for the first time or making that switch when that becomes necessary. And in other words, not looking at it as a burden, but this great opportunity. Hey, we're homeschooling, so the good news is we can actually make the switch. Just having a different attitude adjustment towards the switching requirements can probably help a mom and dad actually feel good about this and not feel so overwhelmed when, like you say, the alternative would be, kids, you're just going to have to, tough it out. You're going to have to figure it out. And and then everybody just hopes it works out. And you got a completely different concern when you can't, when you don't have the authority to change, and when there's no change that's going to happen, even though it's needed. So that's a great first point. Just for folks to be listening, if you're facing a change, look at that as this great advantage, not a disadvantage or a hurdle to really get over.
Yeah, and especially because as parents, we're experts in our kids, right? Like we each have a PhD in each of our kids, how they're wired. I never talk to a homeschooling parent and they have like no idea. Like they have a lot of insights on what their kid loves, what their kid doesn't love. And that's pairs right with what we were saying about the strengths of homeschooling. So you have that expertise and you have the ability to act on it, which I think is a real gift.
That's so true. So let's get to some of the red flags. What are some things that a parent can be paying attention to and looking for that says, I might need to have a conversation with my child, or I might need to take the bull by the horns here and consider changing the curriculum? What are some things to look for?
Sure. So I think a first red flag is prolonged unhappiness in the child. So basically, they're miserable, right? They're coming to you, possibly complaining about the program, or that specific subject has become a real pain point in your homeschool. Now, I did use the word prolonged there because this is a judgment call, right? Sometimes a bad attitude is just a bad attitude. Sometimes a certain subject isn't going to be our favorite, and so it's not like we have a bad day and we're like, all right, we're changing everything. But a lot of times as parents, we can step back from a situation and maybe not openly with the child right away. Think about, is there something here though that is making this more difficult for them? Is there a source of their frustration that's not their character or the fact that they don't want to push through something hard? So a lot of times I think it can be a mix. And so you might have to think about, is this just a challenging topic? But if you're just seeing the struggle on and on, I think you start to think about, all right, maybe we need to switch. Maybe there's an easier way to accomplish this with a different program.
And that's actually what we experienced. That was the initial symptom that we were seeing in our case, is our child was just clearly not motivated. They were complaining. They were clearly discouraged and unhappy with what we were doing, and so it was pretty obvious to us. And this was one of our vocal kids, so they were one to not hold it in, but to let us know. And so that was helpful in a lot of ways, even though at the time it felt like, ooh, okay, we're going to face the work and the effort and the research required to figure out something better. So, and any other signs to be looking for? First is just that general unhappiness. They're complaining, and it's clearly not working on that kind of a level. What else can we be looking for?
Another red flag that I think sometimes as homeschool parents we overlook is a change for us, a change in our capacity specifically. So I think normally we're very oriented around our kids, what's a best fit for them. But sometimes we can be dismissive of thinking through, has anything shifted for us where now this program is going to be too involved, or now that we've got more kids reaching school age, it's not going to work the same way. We need to find a different approach. And I just want to say that's valid, right? I was talking to someone this past weekend at a convention, and they were kind of saying, this is a great fit for my kid, but I just hate it. But they didn't want to kind of take that seriously. I'm kind of like, that's a valid point. I mean, you might be able to find something that's a good fit for your kid and you. It's okay to consider, is this going to just be too taxing for me, the parent? I think that if you're looking at a program, even if you've used it before with other children and you're just dreading starting it again with your next child, hey, maybe you don't need to just press through that. It's okay to say, we're going to make a switch for me, because if I'm already, we haven't even started it again and I'm already just kind of dreading it, I don't think that's a great place to be as a homeschool parent.
No doubt. It's interesting, even as you mentioned that one, I think of the situations we faced in our own family, and high school was that time where we had to make significant changes, primarily based on me and Rachel. So Rachel taught the elementary math to our kids and pretty much stayed with the same curriculum, with one exception with one of our kids. But then when we got to high school, Rachel and I decided that I would take on the larger role in helping our kids through the math and the science at the high school level. And we made significant and consistent changes in the curriculum then, largely based on how I knew I could help my kids the most. And so there were times where I taught in the co-op, There were times where I just guided my student as they were an independent learner through a given textbook. There were times they were in a co-op group setting. They did online teaching. They even did one-on-one personal tutors for math in particular. And again, I think I changed my own attitude kind of to that first point about this being a gift, where there were all these options. And now I was used to making changes. I was more comfortable with it. And we just kind of went with the flow with whatever worked for this child this year, and ended up making lots of changes to accommodate me, my student, and our family.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned lots of options. That's, I think, it's a real blessing, right? There's so many choices. A lot of times when I'm talking to particularly new homeschoolers, I think that they were unprepared for that. They just sort of like, we're going to homeschool, and they thought there would be one clear path, maybe two. And then when they get into like homeschool curriculum world, they're like, what is this? There's so many different things, and how do you even compare them? But I always try to encourage families by saying, you have all these great choices. There's probably more than one good fit. Just try to find one that fits, well, and just go with it. And I mean, there's way more choices than there were when I was being homeschooled. So I think it's a blessing.
Amen. Good point. Well, are there any other things to look for, red flags to pay attention to before we kind of switch gears in our conversation?
Yeah, I would just list one more, and this is a disconnect between the program and your child's learning style. Now, a lot of times that disconnect, you'll notice it because your child's unhappy, like we talked about before. But sometimes they might be fine. They're not complaining, but you're noticing they're not retaining the information. I think a lot of times when we step back, maybe on a break or over the summer, we really see, we did it, we completed the program, but you're not seeing lasting learning. And that's an issue, right? We're not trying to just get through programs. We want our children to retain the information. So this is where you can look at it and see maybe your child's more of a visual learner, and that's not happening with this program. I think where it typically shows up is where a program you picked for your oldest or maybe your middle child worked well, but now you're moving down the line, so to speak, and you've got a child who learns differently, and you're like, oh wow, we've been using this program, but we may have to switch now for this younger child who learns in a different way. So that's just one more to look for.
No, that's a great point, and that's where, as a parent, not only knowing your children well, like you mentioned, knowing what they like, what they don't like, but also knowing their learning styles. And I think the longer you homeschool, you really start to pick up on your children's unique ways of learning, subjects they like, how they do best. And so that's, if you see something switch there and they're not quite picking up on their natural learning style, that's a good thing to be paying attention to.
Absolutely.
Well, folks, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back, because I want to tell you right now that homeschooling moms have been raving about Apologia Education's creation with math curriculum, calling it a total game changer. With hands-on math activities and games, short 30-minute lessons, an open and go format, and a suggested 4-day week schedule, you and your children will love Apologia's math curriculum. One mom said, "I think I finally found it. I've been searching for years for the perfect math curriculum. Something hands-on, with short lessons, has everything laid out in an easy-to-use parent manual for me. Apologia knocked it out of the park with this one." So many homeschool families have switched to Apologia Math after struggling with other curricula choices and have seen their children become excited about math for the first time. Visit apologia.com/math and discover why so many homeschooling families are switching to Apologia Math, authored by Kathryn Gomes, our guest. And Kathryn, I have to tell you, I remember sending you a picture of this young little girl that I met at a homeschool conference earlier this year. And she was so excited to see that Exploring Creation with Math Level 6 had come out this year, because she was one of these students. She was not enjoying her math curriculum. And then after 4th grade, her mom and her decided to switch to Apologia Math Level 5, and she fell in love with it. And so she so wanted to use Apologia Level 6 this year, and it came out, and I got a picture that I took of her and sent that to you. And it was just a sweet moment to know that it really is helping families who are dealing with switching curricula. It's not working. They find something that works, they love it, and then they want to stick with that because they found something that actually matches their learning style and has the things for the parent and the student. So great job. You really did hit it out of the park with this one.
Thank you. And it means so much to me to hear from the kids. I mean, I appreciate Kathy Duffy and I appreciate mom reviews and seeing things. But what always means the most to me is the kids saying that they really love math. That's my secret mission, getting all kids to love math. So
Well, it's a good one. I'm an engineer, so I love math, and I want the same thing. I want students to love math. I want them to see God in math. The wonderful connections there are great. So, again, you did a great job with exploring creation with math levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, all available at apologia.com/math. So in this show, we're talking about recognizing some red flags, how to switch curriculum, how to do it effectively. We've talked about the fact that being able to switch curricula is a gift of homeschooling. It's one of the advantages. You don't have to, work through something that isn't working and try and just figure it out, or realize that life is tough and sometimes you just have to do something you don't like. You can make a switch. So as a parent and a student, that's a positive. You talked about some of the red flags, what to look for, that your student is unhappy, that it's not meeting your capacity as a parent, or it's not matching your student's learning style. So now, as we try to bring this full circle, what are some tips that you can give parents to help them actually make the switch and make it effectively?
yeah, so switching programs, it is a big investment of time and resources. So I think there's some things you can do that really kind of lessen that blow. The first thing is try a sample before, kind of going for it and buying a new program. Most publishing companies, I know Apologia does this, will put a sample online and you can download that, print it. I know with Apologia Math, a lot of families said they printed the sample and actually did it with their kids for several days to see. I think there's nothing like that for showing you how's this newer program going to function in our family? Is it going to be a good fit? And sometimes you can also borrow the program depending on what it is. I know at my co-op, we're always chatting in the lobby saying, hey, could you bring that in? Or if someone has a level that you're looking at, they're not using it that year, we'll take it home for a week, so we can look at it when our kids are sleeping and really page through. But I think that's one of the best ways to really get a sense of, all right, I've seen this online, I've heard about it, but I want to make sure it's a good fit. Another tip is to involve your child in the process. I am a huge proponent of this. My parents did this. They would have me, I won't say I picked the program, right? Because I might have picked something but they would have me help choose. And then I couldn't really complain, right? Because I had been involved in the decision. And so even at the state convention, I'd be walking around the booths with my mom looking at different things. And when I see parents do that, I think, excellent, right? Get them involved, get their thoughts. They're not the whole vote, but if they're chiming in, then you have some investment from them into this decision.
No, that's a great point. And like you say, they're not the whole vote, but involving your kids in their own education is a great just learning tool. It helps your students learn about themselves as well.
I think one other thing to be aware of too that I wanted to mention is that you need to account for gaps and disconnects. So I'm not saying don't switch, obviously, because that's what we've been talking about this whole podcast. But I think you should be aware that when you change programs, it's only natural that there could be some overlap where you're reviewing content you already learned, or a gap where it wasn't covered in this other program and it was covered previously in what you're switching to. I don't think that means you don't switch, but you want to be aware of that, kind of take it into account. A lot of times, curriculum companies will have placement tests or something to give you an idea of where you're landing. And if you just have a plan to review, or you're just mentally prepared to pause and fill in those gaps, I think it's fine. But you don't want to just unrealistically assume that you can jump around and there's not going to be any times when maybe things didn't line up perfectly.
No, that's a great point. So really what I'm hearing as a homeschool parent of 26 years that retired 2 years ago when our seventh graduated, I was not intimidated by that list of suggestions you just gave. And when I think back to the times that we did change, it was really the first time we had to make a major curriculum change that I felt the pressure. Then it actually got a little bit easier and we got more comfortable with it. And the list you just went through didn't feel that intimidating to me. Now, it might be because I've experienced some of it before, but if you're in that boat, if you're especially facing the first time of a big curriculum change, know that other people have had to do the same thing. You're probably going to face it again sometime in the future. All your kids are different. They have different learning styles, different interests. And so just know you're going to get better at this. And here's some suggestions. Like you say, try a sample. Just kind of give it a test drive. Involving your kids in the process is huge because then they got buy-in. And then even when you make a switch, there might be some gaps. And there's probably no such thing as a perfect curriculum. And not everything works for everybody. Not everything works perfectly. But there's so many options out there these days, as you said, that I feel totally confident that a parent and a family and a student can find something that's going to work for whatever field of study they're looking at a given time. So what are some last minute thoughts, things you haven't shared that you would like to leave our families with today on this subject of switching curriculum?
Yeah, I think just in closing, as you're thinking it through, like you said, Davis, you can be confident. No one knows your child better than you. I think the first time you switch is the scariest. And after that, you have to be careful that you don't just constantly want to switch because it gets easier. And if anyone's thinking about switching to Apologia Math, I would just encourage you, like the vast number of Apologia Math families are ones that switched in just because it's a new program. And so we've really been working hard at Apologia to make it an easier transition. We created a placement test, like I was mentioning earlier, about gaps and disconnects so that families could see how does this line up. So, I would just say, give it a try. Download a sample and give it a try.
There you go. Yeah. So apologia.com/math, and that's where you can find everything on the Apologia page. Kathryn, why don't you share with folks places that they can find you, your social media page and other websites that might be of interest for them?
Absolutely. So on YouTube and Instagram, I'm Homeschool Math Mom. I'd absolutely love a follow, not just so you can see my content, but also because I find the comments and messages from homeschoolers just really help me. I have changed things in the math series based on messages I got. And on Facebook, my page is Kathryn M. Gomes. The M's for Marie in the middle there. So that has also been a great place. I'm really grateful for social media because it's just allowed me to stay connected to families and just improve the content. So
fantastic. Well, as always, it's hard to bring these conversations to a close, but it's time to do so. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. We hope you'll join us again next time. This has been a Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. I've been your host, Davis Carman, and our guest today has been Kathryn Gomes, author of Exploring Creation with Mathematics, Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Have a great day, everybody, and until next time, we're walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime.